From the Ear to There Travel Studio, this is the Ear to There Disney Podcast.
The Ear to There Podcast, it's time to start the show. Be sure to hold on tight, here we go. Exploring all the different Disney destinations. Ear to There, it's time to start the fun.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Ear to There Disney Podcast. Walt Disney World Word of the Week. I am your host, Phil Gramlich. I am also the owner and the founder of Ear to There Travel, which is a Disney specialized travel agency. It's my job and the job of every Ear to There Travel vacationeer. That's what we call the agents, the planners here at Ear to There Travel. It is all of our jobs to take away all of that stress. It's a lot of all that anxiety and all that time that it takes to plan a Disney trip, so you can focus on the really fun things like having a great time with your family and friends and enjoying the magic. You can find this podcast, the blog, or get a free no obligation quote over at ear2theretravel.com. All right, let's get right into it. This week's Walt Disney World Word of the Week is brought to you by the letter T. T for tributes.
I volunteer as tribute.
No, Katniss, not that kind of tribute. I crack myself up. No, I am talking about tributes that are hidden in Walt Disney World. And there are different kinds. There are tributes to retired and extinct attractions. There are tributes to Imagineers. There are even tributes to Disney's past and the history of animation and the Disney company. So this week, I just wanted to spend a little bit of time, probably around 15 minutes, and go into some of those hidden tributes in the Walt Disney World theme parks. Now we're going to start off with the tributes to past Disney Imagineers and to others who were very, very important in the history of the Disney company. Now, where else could you find tributes to Imagineers and those who made the theme parks a reality than on Main Street, USA? And I'm talking both in the original park in Disneyland and, of course, on Main Street, USA in the Magic Kingdom. Look up to the windows above your head as you're walking down either Main Street, USA, and you will see all the names, all of those people who were either very, very instrumental in animation and the creation of the Disney company itself from way back in the 1920s and 30s to those Imagineers and executives who helped get Disneyland off the ground and get Walt Disney World up off the ground. So, of course, you see tributes to Ub and Don Iwerks. Ub Iwerks was, of course, one of Walt Disney's earliest partners in animation back in the 1920s. And his son Don worked for the Walt Disney Company and became a legend in his own right as well. You have windows for Disney legends like Alice Davis, Mark Davis, Rolly Crump, Bob Gurr, Harper Goff, Ward Kimball, Roger Brogy. I mean, I could just sit and list every name of every person that is on a window, that has a window on Main Street, USA. That would probably be a pretty boring podcast, honestly. But if you want a virtual who's who of the history of Disneyland, Walt Disney World, that is where you go. Walk down Main Street, USA, and you can look at each and every one of those windows, and they all tell a story of the person who is being honored in each one. And of course, the first window you see as you're entering Magic Kingdom at the train station is, of course, Walt Disney's window on the train station. And the last window that you see at the end of Main Street, of course, again, is Walt Disney's window. So Walt has windows at both the front and the back end of Main Street, USA. And you've heard a lot, I'm sure, on this podcast or in other podcasts or in books, that Walt was rolling out the red carpet for you, right? That was the beginning to a movie, and all the windows are the credits. Well, just like a producer has his name at the very beginning and the very end of the credits, Walt Disney has his name at the very beginning of the park and at the end of Main Street, USA. Pretty cool, right? All right, moving on. Let's talk about some other Disney Imagineering tributes in the park. By the way, I went on to Facebook and asked people, listeners and friends, what they wanted to hear a Word of the Week show about. And I have to thank Walter Songer. Walter came up with this idea. I think he thought I was joking with him. I wasn't. I legitimately was asking what a great idea would be, and Walter came up with this one. So thank you, Walter, for coming up with this one. All right, moving on to some more Imagineering tributes. One of my favorite ones is in Pirates of the Caribbean. Caribbean Queen. If you listen to the other podcasts this week, I can't get Billy Ocean out of my head. And I say Caribbean, and it always makes me think of that old Billy Ocean song. That was sharing the same. All right. So, Pirates of the Caribbean. Of course, a lot of those scenes, the majority of those scenes, those characters were drawn up, were created by Disney legend Mark Davis. He was one of Walt Disney's 9 old men. He created a bunch of very memorable characters in the history of Disney's animated movies. And he came up with a lot of these characters on Pirates. He came up with a lot of the bears on Country Bear Jamboree, the characters on Big Thunder Mountain Railroad, characters in Haunted Mansion. The list is really, really super long. I'm not going to get into everything, but on Pirates of the Caribbean, when you're almost finished, when you enter the treasure room scene, look to your left. There's nothing to your right except for a wall. Look to your left, and this is the Magic Kingdom version, and you will see the treasure room. And above the treasure room is a seal, and the seal, like a family seal. And the family seal, what does it say? It says Marco Daviso, of course, which is, I guess, the Spanish name for Mark Davis. So that's a very cool in-attraction Imagineering tribute. You don't see a ton of them inside the attraction, so I really, really like that one. Another spot to see a whole bunch of Imagineering tributes is in the extended queue of the Haunted Mansion, which isn't too far from Pirates, over in Liberty Square. Now, if you look in the extended queue, if you look in the graveyard as well, that's where you see all of these tributes. So the tombstones are a big one. They're big, big tributes to Imagineers. Of course, there is the Yale Gracie tribute. Now, he's a Disney legend who was paired up with Rolly Crump in the early days of the Haunted Mansion. And he and Rolly would spend their days in a big warehouse coming up with cool, spooky, scary effects for the Haunted Mansion. So in the graveyard, you'll see Yale Gracie's tombstone. It says, Master Gracie laid to rest, no mourning please, at his request. Farewell. You'll also see the crypt for Claude Coates. Claude was originally a background artist for the animated films. And then later on, he became a show designer and had a ton to do with the inside of the Haunted Mansion. His tombstone reads, that's hard to say, tombstone reads, at peaceful rest lies Brother Claude, painted here beneath this sod. I guess it's Claude and sod. My my accent makes those two words not rhyme. Anyway, there are a few other ones in the graveyard as well, including the tombstone for Ex Atencio, and his reads, Francis Xavier, no time off for good behavior. Rest in peace. Now, Ex Atencio came up with the song Grim Grinning Ghosts, which is another thing that's hard for me to say because I speak very quickly, for the Haunted Mansion. He also came up with the song Yo Ho Yo Ho for Pirates of the Caribbean. He also started as an animator and worked on other attractions like Adventures Through Inner Space. Probably my favorite tombstone in the graveyard is that of Leota Toombs. So Leota Toombs was an Imagineer, well, before it was called Imagineering, when it was still called WED. And she was filmed for just a trial run of Madame Leota, who I guess did not have a name just yet. But they filmed her to test out the crystal ball for the Haunted Mansion. Well, guess what? They liked it so much, Disney Imagineers liked her recording so much, that they just kept it. It worked well and they never needed to do it again. So she is immortalized in the Haunted Mansion as the face and voice of the crystal ball. And of course, she's immortalized in the newest or the most recently added tombstone to the graveyard. And of course, that's the one that if you look at it, it has the woman's face on and the eyes will shift from side to side once in a while. As I said that I shifted my eyes from side to side, like you could see me. But Madame Leota's tombstone reads, Dear sweet Leota, beloved by all, in regions beyond now, having a ball. Now, there are a lot more tributes to Disney Imagineers all over the parks and resorts. I can't possibly cover them all in 15 minutes, so I'm going to move on to the tributes of extinct attractions that you can find in Walt Disney World. I love the quote from Walt Disney where Walt said, "Disneyland is like a piece of clay. If there is something I don't like, I'm not stuck with it. I can reshape and revamp." So Walt Disney World will never be completed, just like Disneyland will never be completed. And lots of times, someone's favorite attraction is taken out to be replaced by a newer, probably more technologically advanced attraction. It happens every year almost that something is gone. Just think about the Maelstrom is now Frozen Ever After. I'm not going to get into it. I know. There are so many Maelstrom fans still mourning the loss. So I'm not going to get into my feelings. I've done it enough on the past on different shows. All right. So I have 4 tributes that I actually previously shared in a blog post like 3 years ago. But looking at that today, that had 17 shares on it. So I don't think a whole lot of people saw that blog post. So I'm going to recap it here. I'm actually going to add a few more that I didn't mention in that blog post. So even if you did read it 3 years ago, there is still going to be some new stuff for you here. All right. So I want to start with Magic Kingdom and Seven Dwarfs Mine Train. Now, before there was a Seven Dwarfs Mine Train in the park, there was, of course, Snow White's Adventure or Snow White's Scary Adventure, whichever you want to call it. Now, that attraction closed in 2012 to make way for New Fantasyland and to make way for Seven Dwarfs Mine Train. But not all of Snow White's Scary Adventure is gone forever. So get this, if you're on the attraction and you spot 2 vultures on the attraction while you're driving by on your mine car, those 2 vultures were actually a part of the original Snow White's Scary Adventure. So they are just 2 of the pieces that Imagineering recycled and put in as a tribute or as a budget saver. They put into Seven Dwarfs Mine Train. Now, the other one I wanted to mention, at the end of the attraction, when your brakes hit and you look to your right and you see the witch or the hag or whatever you want to call her, the evil queen in disguise, and she's knocking on the cottage of the 7 dwarfs, and she has an apple in her hand. Look inside the cottage and you will see Snow White, you will see Dopey, you will see them dancing. Those figures inside the cottage that are dancing, spinning around, they are original figures also from Snow White's Scary Adventure. So that attraction lives on in Seven Dwarfs Mine Train. I don't know if it's actually a tribute, but they are recycled pieces and they are living on in that attraction. All right, so more to where Snow White's Scary Adventure used to sit. It sits on the spot that is now Princess Fairy Tale Hall. And you once could meet Snow White inside Princess Fairy Tale Hall. Probably you will be able to again. They rotate in and out of there sometimes, the princesses. But like I said, that used to be the location, the geographical location for the attraction. So when you get into the room where the meet and greet takes place with your princesses, there are a collection of books on a table in between the 2 princesses in the room. One of those books is open so that guests can have a quick sneak peek. Now, what book is that? Of course, it is Snow White and the 7 Dwarfs. So there is a little tribute to the attraction that once stood in place of the Princess Fairy Tale Hall. All right, so elsewhere in the Magic Kingdom once was 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. It wasn't very far, actually, from where Princess Fairy Tale Hall now sits. But when the attraction was finally closed down for good in 1994, it was decided that a bunch of tributes were going to be built in its place. The first one is a squid. Now, across from the Journey of the Little Mermaid Under the Sea attraction is a DVC sales building. Oh, by the way, there's a tribute to an Imagineer here as well. The sign for the DVC sales building says H. Goff Cartography. And of course, that is in reference to Disney legend and Imagineer Harper Goff. But look on top of that building, there's a weather vane on top of the building. And that weather vane is of a squid, a giant squid that once occupied that spot for 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. Now get this one, the water around the Ariel meet and greet and the Journey of the Little Mermaid attraction Apparently, when 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea was closed and the lagoon was drained, cast members kept some of that water. And when New Fantasyland opened, they dumped that water from 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea into the water outside of those two new attractions. So that's another piece of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea that lives on inside Magic Kingdom. Now, also, the ship that you rode on that attraction was, of course, the Nautilus. Did you know that there are two Nautiluses? Nautili, Nautilo, I don't know. Two Nautilus ship tributes inside Magic Kingdom. The one is in the queue near the water for Journey of the Little Mermaid. You'll see a fossil along the wall of the Nautilus. It's tinted a little bit green, so look for that little spot, that little green spot in the wall, and you'll see the Nautilus hidden there. The other one is outside of the Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh. Outside there is a tree that is home to Winnie the Pooh. Now, that tree used to actually be across the walkway, across the pathway on the other side where 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea once sat. And it made up a part of Pooh's Playful Spot, which was a little play area for kids. So, all right, this one you have to kind of be a little bit strange, I think, to get to see. Or you have to take the risk that people think you're a crazy person. Go into the door. Now, the door is child-sized, so you have to either go down on your hands and knees or really hunch over. For me, I'm not very tall, so I could just hunch over and kind of waddle through. But for someone who's probably more than like 5'8" or 5'9", you might have to go down on all fours. But get inside that tree, and over the doorway inside the tree, you will see a carved Nautilus. Yes, another Nautilus ship from 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea is inside that tree. Okay, I have another one at Magic Kingdom, and it's in Tomorrowland. And this one is really, really cool. So as a kid growing up, one of my favorite Disney movies was Flight of the Navigator. And if you were a child of the 80s or even of the 90s, you've probably seen Flight of the Navigator. It's a movie where a kid kind of disappears for like a decade, shows up, he thinks he's gone for like a minute, turns out he's gone for like 10 years. His whole family is aged and moved on. He is not. He is still like a 12-year-old kid. Listen, it's an awesome movie. There's aliens. There's Paul Rubens, who does the voice of the ship. It's a cool movie. Sarah Jessica Parker, actually, in all of her early Sarah Jessica Parker-iest. She actually looks like Dee Snider in this. I don't know why. She had the same look of Dee Snider with like the pink rock and roll hair and the curly big hair, all that. Dee Snider's the singer for Twisted Sister. Anyway, that's not mean. She just looks like him in this movie. All right, back to Magic Kingdom. So in Tomorrowland, not too far from Space Mountain, you will find the Thirst Rangers spaceship and cool scanner. Basically, this is a giant misting fan that blows cold mist onto guests when it's super hot and cools them down. Well, if you look up at the ship that is the Thirst Rangers spaceship, it is actually one of the Flight of the Navigator spaceships. It was repurposed. It was repainted from the days when it sat on the backlot on Disney's Backlot Studio Tour. But it is one of those ships that they had in the backlot. It was repainted and repurposed. And it is a tribute still living in the park to this day. How about this one? We're staying in the Magic Kingdom a lot for this episode, and I'm way over my 15 minutes already, but we're going to keep going. It's my show. I can make up the rules, right? Why not? All right. On the Tomorrowland Transit Authority People Mover, when you go through one of the super dark tunnels on your left-hand side, or on your right-hand side if you're going backwards, you will see a small section, a small piece of the model for Walt Disney's Progress City, which was his huge, huge model that was built for his experimental prototype community of tomorrow, or as he once messed up and said on a video, the experimental prototype city of tomorrow. But he actually meant community. They just ran with it anyway. And that was actually one of the last videos he ever made for the Disney company. But anyway, if you look to your left, look to your right, in that dark tunnel on the People Mover, you will see a section of Progress City. And that whole model, of course, was on the second floor of the Carousel of Progress at the 6465 World's Fair, and eventually made its way out to Disneyland and was on the second floor of the Carousel of Progress there in Disneyland. Now, when Carousel of Progress was moved to Walt Disney World, that whole model was disassembled and only a small piece of it made its way out to the East Coast to Walt Disney World. All right, how about this one? Staying in Magic Kingdom, you can still find Mr. Toad at a couple different points in the Magic Kingdom. Of course, Mr. Toad's Wild Ride closed in September of 1998. And there were a lot of upset fans. There were Toad-ins, where mostly annual pass holders, I believe, would sit in their Mr. Toad gear, their shirts, their t-shirts, outside of Mr. Toad's Wild Ride, trying to save it. As we all know, that did not work. Mr. Toad's Wild Ride closed in 1998 and was eventually replaced by The Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh. But when you get on that attraction these days, Mr. Toad is still there. So as soon as you enter Al's house on the attraction, take a look to your immediate left, and there's a picture on the wall of Mr. Toad handing over the deed of the property to Al from The Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh. Now, where's the other place you can find Mr. Toad? You may have seen it, you may already know it, but of course, it is in the pet cemetery outside the exit of the Haunted Mansion. All right, and the last one I wanted to mention is over in Epcot. And in January of 1999, the now very much missed Horizons Future World attraction closed. That was in January of 1999. This attraction was way, way, way ahead of its time. It even had a choose your own ending, like choose your own adventure kind of ending to the attraction, where you could have one of 3 different endings at the end of the attraction. The honest truth was it wasn't drawing the crowds, wasn't drawing the numbers that it used to. So Disney closed it in January of 1999. But there are still a few tributes to the attraction left in Epcot and in Mission Space, which is the attraction that replaced it. The main one is when you go in Mission Space and you're in the queue, look at the giant gravity wheel that rotates in the queue. Right in the middle, right smack dab in the middle of that gravity wheel is the old logo for the attraction, Horizons. And that is going to do it for this week's episode of the Ear to There Disney podcast, Walt Disney World Word of the Week. That is like a 10-second title. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. I really appreciate it. I hope you enjoyed it. And even if you didn't learn of a new tribute, I hope you enjoyed listening to all of these. And you can kind of give this episode or show this episode to someone who's like, hey, Disney keeps replacing this stuff. Yeah, they replace it and they take things out, but they always leave little breadcrumbs, little trails of the things that came before. So I really love that. I love all the tributes. I love the tributes to the Imagineers and the attractions and the things that came before. So again, thank you so much for listening to this episode. I really, really do hope you enjoyed it. Just remember, there will be a new episode of the Ear to There Disney podcast each and every Monday, as well as a new episode of the Word of the Week or It's a Food World on Thursdays. So until next time, thank you so much for listening. You are awesome. Have an amazing week. Bye-bye.
Ear to There.